What's up, guys? We are on to the 12th shelf of my wrestling collection. At the tail end of 2003 into 2004, we have Unforgiven right after SummerSlam. Great pay-per-view. Lita and Trish Stratus versus Molly Holly and Gail Kim. Women's division starting to come together here. Scott Steiner versus Test again. Furthering their feud, something for Scott Steiner to do. They didn't completely abandon him yet. Dudley Boys and Spike Dudley versus La Resistance and Rob Conway. Thankfully, I believe this was the end of that feud. JR and the King versus Coach and Al Snow. I like that they were doing a little kind of like, it wasn't necessarily wrestlers having some kind of storyline going on. They even included the announcers, referees, things like that. Intercontinental Championship, they added Rob Van Dam into the mix to build that undercard again. Shawn Michaels versus Randy Orton, a classic match. Why these two didn't work together more often, I don't know. Shane McMahon versus Kane, another great match. Like I said, WWE in this era couldn't miss anything. Triple H versus Goldberg, not that great. When you see a career on the line versus the title, you know the person's going to win the title. Why they chose to do it here instead of at SummerSlam, I don't know. But that's what they decided to do. Overall, solid pay-per-view. Then we've got more Raws, SmackDowns, Velocities, and Sunday Night Heats. Then we've got the SmackDown pay-per-view, No Mercy 2003. Another solid pay-per-view. APA versus the Bashams. See, this is the thing too with when they split up to where they literally had to build new talent as well. So the Basham brothers, another new tag team. I liked their gimmick. They just didn't do much with them. You had Zach Gowen versus Matt Hardy. Again, not very solid. Chris Benoit versus A-Train was actually a very entertaining match. Rey Mysterio versus Tajiri. They're still doing a really good job of keeping the Cruiserweight title relevant here. Eddie Guerrero versus Big Show for the U.S. belt. Building up that mid-card and main event stars. And then Stephanie versus Vince. I didn't think it was going to be good, but instead it was phenomenal. The storyline got the crowd into it big time. I mean, you didn't know how bad it was going to get, and it was just so entertaining. Kurt Angle and John Cena tore the house down. And then The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar tore the house down again, just like they did the previous year at this exact pay-per-view. So all in all, a great pay-per-view right here. Then we've got more SmackDowns, Raws, Sunday Night Heats, and Velocities. This was the last video of these that I did. Obviously, like I said, it showed that it was real impossible once you get distracted with schools, work, things like that. You just couldn't keep up with trying to film all of those shows every week. Luckily, obviously, 15 years later, the network came out. Then we've got one of the better Survivor Series in a very long time. Loved this Survivor Series. They were on a roll. 2001, 2002, 2003 were all amazing Survivor Series. It felt big again. And this, the Bashams versus Eddie and Chavo for the tag titles. They were starting to push the Bashams here. Tajiri versus Jamie Noble. Still another great job with, building up the undercard. And you could tell the little blue dots were the SmackDown matches and the red dots were Raw matches. Molly Holly versus Lita. Solid match. And then with Team Lesnar versus Team Angle, they had the David versus Goliath thing going on because you had all of the solid workers with Team Angle with Bradshaw thrown in there for some reason. And then you had Team Lesnar, which was just all these giant, huge guys. Brock Lesnar, Big Show, A-Train. And then, they weren't using Matt Morgan or Nathan Jones, but they used them for this match. Just because of their size. I'm sure they were just Vince, that was the main reason Vince brought them in, just like the Great Khali. They couldn't wrestle, but they had a huge, they were huge just to look, just like Omos now. Then you had the Stone Cold versus Eric Bischoff match, which was phenomenal. The crowd was so into it because they didn't want Stone Cold to be gone. And look at the talent too. I mean, that's what I said, this card is phenomenal. Shawn Michaels, Booker T, Rob Van Dam, and the Dudleys versus Chris Jericho, Christian, Scott Steiner, Mark Henry, and Randy Orton. Phenomenal match. Ambulance match with Shane McMahon versus Kane. So great. Undertaker versus Mr. McMahon. Great. And then and this was probably their better match, Goldberg versus Triple H right here. And yeah, just all in all, a great pay-per-view. Love this pay-per-view. Then you've got Armageddon 2003, last pay-per-view 2003. Normally, December pay-per-views are not very good, but WWE at this point with 2002 and this one, very solid, very good. Tag team turmoil again, showing just how deep this tag team division is. Why Val Venus was with Lance Storm instead of William Regal. I'm wondering if William Regal was hurt at this point. Hurricane and Rosie, loved them as a tag team. Scott Steiner and Test together as a tag team now. Mark Jindrak and Garrison Cade. Wow. Trish Stratus and Lita versus Chris Jericho and Christian. That was an interesting storyline that carries all the way to WrestleMania 20. Booker T versus Mark Henry. They were just trying to build Mark Henry up to be something. Rob Van Dam versus Randy Orton was really good. This is when they were really starting to push Randy Orton too, and they were really building up that undercard. Love it. Shawn Michaels and Batista, another really solid match, and it was early Batista as well. Kane, Goldberg, and Triple H. Great match. It was a way to get the belt off of Goldberg without actually beating Goldberg. So that's what they did to put the belt back on Triple H. But all in all, solid pay-per-view, very enjoyable. Then we've got 2004 Royal Rumble. Not the best Royal Rumble, not as good as the previous two, but still very good. The Dudley Boys versus Ric Flair and Batista, great tag team match. Rey Mysterio and Jamie Noble, again, making the Cruiserweight title mean something. They broke up the Guerreros. Didn't really get that, probably because they wanted to push Eddie Guerrero to be, a main event guy. So they had to split him up, I guess. Royal Rumble match. This is when Chris Benoit won the Royal Rumble. Brock Lesnar versus Hardcore Holly was the match that stole this show. No one was expecting anything from that match, and boy did they deliver. Why they didn't use Hardcore Holly more in the main event picture after this match, I don't know. But this was a great match. I loved the storyline between them. Triple H and Shawn Michaels, can never go wrong there. I mean, all in all, a great pay-per-view. Set up the match, too, in the Royal Rumble between Lesnar and Goldberg. Definitely check this out if you haven't seen it before. Then you've got No Way Out 2004. Ultimo Dragon, Paul London, and Billy Kidman versus Tajiri, Akio, and Sakota. Not the greatest match. I don't even really remember much about that match, which shows it probably wasn't that great. APA versus the World's Greatest Tag Team, which was the new name for Team Angle. Hardcore Holly versus Rhino. They're trying to keep Hardcore Holly relevant. Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty versus the Basham Brothers and Shaniqua. Again, I love the Bashams, but again, they didn't use them very well. Nydia versus Jamie Noble. The crowd was really into this match. I mean, it was funny to watch too. I could, rewind the tape and watch it over and over and over again. Rey Mysterio versus Chavo Guerrero. Again, making the Cruiserweight title mean something. At least when they split Eddie Guerrero and Chavo up, they put Chavo right into the Cruiserweight division. Triple threat match. Kurt Angle, John Cena, and Big Show. Great match. Like I said, it just shows just how deep this card is, that, this isn't even the main event. You got these people in there. And then you had Brock Lesnar versus Eddie Guerrero. You would have never in a million years thought Eddie Guerrero was going to win this match, but he does, and the crowd goes bananas. And Goldberg's obviously here sitting in the crowd because he was invited by Brock Lesnar. So, I mean, it sets up the main event for WrestleMania, and it sets up the big dream match between Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. So, I mean, all in all, very solid pay-per-view. The crowd was really into this pay-per-view. Then we've got WrestleMania. This one doesn't have the matches on the back of the DVD, so I had to pull the innards out here. Oh. All right, so you got Big Show versus John Cena. You know, that was a solid opening match. The crowd was super into it. John Cena wins his first big singles championship. Then you had the Fatal 4-Way for the World Tag Team titles. The fact that, you know, I know they were just trying to get everyone on the card to give them their WrestleMania payday, but the fact that you had this many stars in the promotion at this time to have all these matches was really impressive. RVD and Booker T, which was just kind of a slap-together tag team. Versus the Dudley Boys versus Garrison Cade and Mark Jindrak, which I liked that tag team. Versus La Resistance. Then you had Chris Jericho versus Christian. Like I said from Armageddon, the storyline went all the way to here with Christian then being with Trish Stratus instead of Chris Jericho. Trish Stratus turns heel there. Then you had the Rock and Sock Connection versus Evolution. This was the one match where The Rock didn't seem like The Rock. He didn't seem like he was in as great a shape, and it didn't seem like he had all of the charisma he normally did, or it seemed like he kind of lost a step. Then you had Sable and Tori Wilson versus Stacy Keibler and Miss Jackie in a Playboy evening gown match. That was your bathroom break. Then you had Cruiserweight Championship Open. Again, they're probably just trying to get all of the people on the card as possible. Chavo Guerrero, Jamie Noble, Funaki, Ultimo Dragon, Rey Mysterio, Nunzio, Tajiri, Shannon Moore, and Billy Kidman. Not that great of a match. Then you had Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar with Stone Cold as the special guest referee. Everyone loved Stone Cold. Everyone knew that Goldberg and Lesnar were both leaving after this show. And neither of them wanted to lose on the way out. And it just made for just the worst match on this entire card. Why they, you know, I don't get it. They would have been better off having them face each other at No Way Out. Fatal 4-Way for the WWE Tag Team titles. You had the Basham Brothers, the World Greatest Tag Team, APA, and Scotty 2 Hotty and Rikishi. Then you had the women's title match, Victoria versus Molly Holly. Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle for the WWE title. Classic match. Undertaker versus Kane, not the best. Their one at WrestleMania 14 was better. But it was the return of the Undertaker and his dead man gimmick. Shawn Michaels versus Triple H versus Chris Benoit. Very solid match. And then again, another person that you did not expect to win with Chris Benoit gets the nod here and gets the title. All in all, very solid WrestleMania. They couldn't do no wrong in this point in time. And this was the first WrestleMania that they released on DVD that was in a 3-disc pack. That also had like the Hall of Fame ceremonies and trailers and things like that in it. Then we've got Backlash 2004. This was one of those backlashes right after WrestleMania never seemed to be as good. You know, you're starting to get that summer lull here in 2004. Not quite like 2003. Tajiri versus Jonathan Coachman. Don't really get it. Victoria versus Lita. You know, they're throwing someone in there besides Trish Stratus, which is nice. The Hurricane and Rosie versus La Resistance. Love the Hurricane and Rosie. Great match. Shelton Benjamin versus Ric Flair was surprisingly very, very good. This was when they did the draft, so Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas were broken up. So that's why you'll start to see, that's one of the things I liked too, is they would, they'd still keep the hard split, but they do a draft and shake it up every year. Edge versus Kane. Edge came over from SmackDown. Not the greatest match. Chris Jericho versus Christian with Trish Stratus, a continuation of their feud from some WrestleMania. Randy Orton versus Cactus Jack was phenomenal. I mean, Randy Orton was really starting to come into his own here. And then you had a rematch from WrestleMania, which was not as good as their WrestleMania match. Chris Benoit, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels. Then we've got the SmackDown pay-per-view Judgment Day. And you'll start to see that the undercard is changing. And that, with the draft, they had to make some changes, obviously. So Tori Wilson versus Dawn Marie. It was not a continuation of their feud from the year before. So I don't know what their feud was going on here. Scotty 2 Hotty versus Mordecai. They were trying to make Mordecai be the next big deal there. And Scotty 2 Hotty was just the guy they were going to squash. Jackie versus Chavo Guerrero for the Cruiserweight title. I loved that storyline, and the crowd was super into it. WWE Tag Team title match. Rico and Charlie Haas are the champions versus Billy Gunn and Hardcore Holly. And that's how you can tell they're starting to scramble here, because they always seem to strip all the talent from SmackDown to move them to Raw. And then SmackDown would have to build their undercard up again. And then you have Rob Van Dam and Rey Mysterio versus the Dudley Boys. Rob Van Dam was from Raw, so they brought him over to SmackDown, so they put him with Rey Mysterio. Then in the U.S. title, they're starting to, Rene Dupree, another person from Raw who came over, because they kept the other two La Resistance people over on Raw, and they'd use them still as a tag team. So John Cena versus Rene Dupree. The crowd really hated Rene Dupree, but out of the 3 La Resistance members, I thought he was the worst. Undertaker versus Booker T. They turned Booker T heel. He came from Raw. And, yeah, it is what it is there. Eddie Guerrero versus JBL. It was okay. It was a brutal match, but it was okay. This is when they finally they found the gimmick that works for Bradshaw. So, like I said, they were trying to build, they had to scramble to build new people up because they pillaged them and sent them all to Raw. Then you've got Bad Blood 2004. Not as good as 2003, but it was okay. Like I said, summer lull here. You had Victoria, Gail Kim, Lita, and Trish Stratus for the women's title. Eugene versus Jonathan Coachman. Eric Bischoff's nephew, I believe, is what Eugene was. Chris Jericho versus Tomko. One of their new guys they're building up. That's with Christian. I liked him with Christian. And then here you go, you see the 2 remaining members of La Resistance versus Chris Benoit and Edge. Chris Benoit and Edge both came to Raw from SmackDown. Then you have Randy Orton versus Shelton Benjamin. Great match. Not as good as Ric Flair versus Shelton Benjamin, but still really good. Shawn Michaels versus Triple H again. At this point, I'm starting to get sick of that feud. And then you had Chris Benoit versus Kane, which was not very good. Kane really needed someone really good to work with in order to be effective. And Chris Benoit, as good as he is, doesn't really have the charisma to carry the match. With Kane, anyway. So all in all, average pay-per-view. And then finally for this shelf, we've got the SmackDown pay-per-view, The Great American Bash. Yep, you can see Charlie Haas versus Luther Reigns, which is SmackDown's answer to Tyson Tomko. You can see they kind of do some parallels, whenever they do this too. Tori Wilson versus Sable. Billy Gunn versus Kenzo Suzuki. They were like I said, they were trying to use Billy Gunn, but I don't even remember who Kenzo Suzuki was. And then Hardcore Holly versus Mordecai. Again, they were trying to have Mordecai squash everybody. And then the United States Championship 4-way match. Building up that undercard. John Cena, Booker T, Rob Van Dam, and Rene Dupree. And then Cruiserweight title, you got Rey Mysterio and Chavo again. Another great solid match. Undertaker versus the Dudley Boys. Dudley Boys came from being faces on Raw to coming to SmackDown and being heels. So I kind of like that. And then you had Eddie Guerrero versus JBL again for the title. You know, SmackDown was starting to get its momentum back, you know, building up their undercard. But that does it for this shelf. If you liked the video, like and subscribe. All the support is greatly appreciated. Definitely leave comments on any of these pay-per-views as far as what you thought of them. Otherwise, I will see you next time.